everyone. So thank you for coming to Career Q&A with Engineering Career Services. Really, really excited. And Nancy is, I'm sure she'll be back in a moment. And so I really am excited to be bringing this program to us, neurodiverse students and students with disabilities, meeting the employability program at the University Career Center. Just wanted to reference that name so I didn't miss any word. And we are so excited to talk to you about your experiences. I know that Nancy Forsythe will be rejoining us in just a moment, and she will help us lead the conversation. And until she returns, could you guys please introduce yourselves? Adi?
Sure, I can go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Adi Thumalapalli. I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering in 2020, so I'm an alumni now. And currently I'm working for the Department of Infrastructure and Development in the city of Salisbury as a project engineer. And I think later on, I'll be able to talk a little bit more about my experiences and how I came to work in the position that I have right now.
Perfect. And Nathan?
Hi, my name is Nathan Mitchell. I'm a computer science student here at Maryland. I'm a junior currently, so I'm going to graduate in 2024. And this summer, I had my first internship with Northrop Grumman, a software engineering internship. So should be able to talk about that later as well.
Perfect. And Matthew's camera isn't working today, but Matthew, could you please introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, so I'm Matt Valentino, and I'm a junior in computer engineering. And I also worked at Northrop Grumman, and I hope to talk more about that later. I was in their space systems division.
Amazing. And Nancy, I will let you introduce yourself in a moment. I just wanted to share that for anyone watching this replay, we want you to know that Engineering Career Services has resources for all kinds of communities. We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion resources page to showcase your identity, evaluate companies for diversity inclusion, and have other information for all kinds of identities. So we're looking forward to diving in. Take it away, Nancy.
Thanks so much, Lizzie. And I want to thank the College of Engineering and Veronica Perrigan, the new director, in particular, for their interest in this topic. We, of course, think that this is, a key to the success of many of the students in our on our campus. And I'm going to share with you a slideshow.
And I just wanted to make sure everyone knows your title as well as Senior Faculty Specialist, Disability Inclusion. Is that correct?
That's right. I'm going to pull up the slide and it'll all be on there. Okay, let me start this as a slideshow. Okay, so to begin, again, my name is Nancy Forsythe, and I work at the University Career Center, partnering with the Engineering Career Services Office. And I run a program called EmployABILITY, which is focused on diversity inclusion and disability inclusion in particular. At the university, I work both with students and with our employer partners. We want to talk today about diversity at the university, and in particular, how we can promote good career preparation as well as employment opportunities for students. You just were introduced to our my co-speakers on the panelists today. We did hope to hear as well from Nina Agrawal, who graduated last year and is currently working at MITRE Corporation, but she's unable to join us. So we have our three other speakers. Let's begin by discussing what neurodiversity is. I don't know if this is a term that is familiar to you, but neurodiversity is a term that we use to refer to the perspective that differences in how people think, and how they emote, and how they reason are a normal and predictable part of the human experience, and that we should take those differences in abilities and leverage them to create value and enhance innovation. This is both on campus as well as in the workforce. That's the definition, but the kinds of diagnoses that are included in neurodiversity, ADHD, some mental health challenges, autism, dyslexia, things like Tourette's syndrome, epilepsy, these non-apparent invisible disabilities are what we are referring to with neurodiversity. Interestingly, on our campus, if you look at the people who get accommodations through our Accessibility Disability Services Office, over 90%, upwards of 95% of those students would fall under this term neurodiversity. When we think of disability, we tend to think of the more traditional categories of mobility impairments, vision impairments, hearing impairments, but that's not the case for most of the students on our campus. And so we want to educate the campus to understand that disability includes these non-apparent invisible conditions that we are labeling neurodiversities. One of the biggest issues that students face, of course, is disclosure. We know from research across the country that only about 45% of students with disabilities will disclose and seek accommodations on a campus. And oftentimes that's either because they're too highly stigmatized. Students on campus want to leave that part of their identity behind when they come to campus, and they want a fresh start, so they don't seek accommodations. Or they're unclear how you go about doing it because the burden shifts to students on a college campus, whereas it used to be either teachers or parents' responsibility. When you get to campus, it's the student's responsibility. They're not sure what to do. But for a host of reasons, under half of all students who are eligible will seek accommodations. There are a couple things I want you to know about disclosure. Probably the most important is that I run workshops on disclosure through the EmployABILITY program all year long and can answer any of your questions about disclosure. If I had to make a general rule about disclosure, and this is more along the lines of coaching about disclosure, this is not the legal thinking about disclosure, but I would coach you by saying that disability is typically about asking for accommodations. That is, you don't disclose unless you need accommodations. Some people will disclose because they're disability proud and that's who they are and they want to proclaim it. But most people, won't bring it up unless they have to ask for an accommodation. And so while we use the term disclosure, what we really should be talking about is asking for accommodations. Now, people think that it's disclosure that is the most important thing, but I would tell you that what's really important is to remember that it's not about getting the job, it's about keeping the job. And the most important thing there is learning to manage a neurodiversity in the workplace. That's what the EmployABILITY program does. It coaches you on how to use what you're learning here on campus through formal services, but also by becoming a good observer of your own behavior and how you are the most successful, and translating those abilities, those skills, those preferences to the workplace. When we think about the experience of neurodiversity on campus, students are particularly concerned along a few lines. On our campus in particular, we still rely heavily on meritocratic thinking. That is, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you're not succeeding, it's because you're lazy. We believe that the system, if you really work hard enough, works for you, but we know that's not true. We know that oftentimes the system favors neurotypical people, and neurodiverse students are going to have a harder time. And we're here to coach you in how to manage that situation. Students also hear, neurodivergent students hear from their neurotypical peers that they are getting an unfair and an undeserved advantage. Again, that adds to kind of the stigmatizing of looking for supports and services on campus, and leads students to be unwilling, disinclined to talk about their experience as a neurodivergent students. We know that we have a long way to go in terms of training faculty and staff to listen and to understand neurodiversity, and to make all of our resources on campus accessible. In the employability program and most of the neurodiversity services on campus, we just take a completely different perspective, which I want you to understand, because we are looking at neurodiversity from a strengths-based perspective. We want to help you learn to manage a neurodiversity on campus and then in the workplace by understanding the ways in which your neurodiversity has made you a stronger candidate for a job or a stronger employee. So that means that we look at the ways in which your disability has contributed to positive outcomes in your experience, which you can then share with an employer. Students have a really hard time with this because they just don't understand disability or neurodiversity as a strength, right? And it requires a big change of framework. But we're working across campus to promote this perspective, but working as well with individual students to help you learn to tell your story from a strengths-based perspective. Here's a little graphic that gives you some small flavor of what a strengths-based perspective looks like. For any given neurodiversity, while there may be challenges that require accommodations, there are also strengths which make someone a good candidate for a job. Again, we want to help you learn what that strength is and how you can use it to promote yourself, to brand yourself in an employment situation. This is just a little look at some of the places where we have placed neurodivergent students over the last, since the beginning of this calendar year. All of these companies have neurodiversity programs that support neurodivergent students and understand their unique strengths, as well as when this is the case, the challenges, and are able to accommodate students to maximize their value and what they can contribute to the organization. I just wanted to call your attention to a few things that we have coming up in the near future. We're currently recruiting for the Workforce Recruitment Program, which is a federal internship program, internship and hiring program. WRP.gov, go there. All the information is there for you to learn about, but the deadline's October 10th. If you're listening to this after October 10th, come around next year in September and look for information about the Workforce Recruitment Program. Something I'm very excited about is a new partnership we're establishing with Mentra, which is a job search platform designed specifically for people who are neurodivergent. We're partnering with Mentra through a new University Council for Neurodiversity Employment, a national group that UMD has been invited to join. We're still in the process of working out exactly how this is going to work, so I can't give you the sign-up information right now, but it will come across your inboxes and social media, so pay attention. I'm very confident that this is going to be a real boon for students, that we will have lots of opportunities available with employer partners who are neurodiversity inclusive. So keep your eye out for that. The University Career Fair is coming up. I'm sure you've heard about that. If you need any support around a neurodiversity to attend and succeed in the University Career Fair, I'm the person you want to be in touch with. I also will offering individual counseling and coaching appointments throughout the year, and look for our employability programming throughout the year. Something that's really interesting coming up very soon is the Stanford University Summit. It's all virtual. It's free. It's 3 full days of just really interesting programming. You can hear from anybody in almost any field related to neurodiversity. I like to point that out. UMD is generally represented with presentations one way or another, but the connections you can make and the information that's accessible through this summit is important. So I'll wrap up with, please be in touch with me. The most important thing in this presentation is that email address there. That's me. Be in touch with me, and we can get you on track for success as a neurodiverse candidate. Okay, so I don't know if does anybody have any questions about what I just said before I turn this over to all of you? Okay, good. So the College of Engineering has a very strong partnership with Northrop Grumman. We've been talking with Northrop for a couple years now about neurodiversity programming, and they've taken steps this way and that way, but this summer they finally come together and created a neurodiversity pilot program that they want to expand going forward in partnership with the University of Maryland. So we were able to recruit a number of our students to participate in this pilot program this summer. And we have 2 of them with us, Nathan and Matt. And so I think I would like to start by asking Nathan and Matt to talk about their experience. Nathan, maybe you could begin. Could you describe for people what the experience was like? What did you do? And what was a typical week like for you in the program? Are you on mute, Nathan?
Yeah, sorry about that. At the beginning of the internship and about the second week, I was assigned to a project team. So basically I worked hand in hand with the team lead on a daily basis. Like, we had stand-up meetings every morning, so you had the opportunity to find whatever task you're supposed to be working on, ask any questions, and potentially meet with them afterwards one-on-one as well if you really needed like specific help on some problem. And basically we worked as an agile development team, and we were given tickets, and along the way, I learned the Tickle scripting language, which was new to me. And basically I was working with flight software and testing flight software using Tickle scripts. And that was the majority of what I worked on throughout the summer.
So Nathan, I'm curious, did you know you were in a neurodiversity pilot program? I mean, did it stick out in any way?
I would say not really. I was treated as a member of the team like anyone else. So there wasn't really specific programming related to like neurodiversity or counseling. And I thought that just overall the culture of the company was very like welcoming, and it was easy to ask questions, and people overall were very friendly. So I felt like I was supported the whole way, and that they really wanted me to succeed.
Great. Hey, Matt, can you speak to the same issues?
Yeah, actually, I would fully agree with Nathan on that. The culture was really welcoming, and everybody made it a point to let you know that they were there to help you. And if you had any questions or any suggestions or anything, that you should say them.
And Matt, did you notice any way in which you felt different being part of a neurodiversity program?
Not at all. If I had gone in without the knowledge of knowing I was in the program, I would have had no idea.
Good. I think that's interesting, and credit to Northrop for doing it that way. I know that Northrop has been preparing for a program like this and doing some education and training of staff internally around issues like this. But I think it's good for other students to hear that you don't walk around with a big like ND on your forehead or something. Like you're in a neurodiversity program. So that's great. Matt, what was your team? What was your work day like?
Yeah, so in the beginning, a lot of my work was just research, like a bunch of different languages, programs, softwares, because I was just catching up to where everybody else was. But then after that, I worked a lot with Jenkins, doing automating building and deployment of different softwares. It was really cool.
Interesting. I know from previous conversations with you that there was one moment at the end of the summer when your internship was wrapping up, Nathan, where they did bring together the employees, the students who are participating in the internship program, in order to get feedback. What would you say the experience of other people was? What was the feedback like that you heard during that meeting?
I would say it was pretty similar to mine. I mean, I think overall, like people within the program and just all of the interns I met, it seemed like they felt that they were supported, and it's an environment where you can feel free to ask questions, and that basically everyone's there to help you. So they're pretty flexible and just willing to help you make it the best experience.
Great. And Matt, can you talk a little bit about the application process? Do you remember it? Like,
yeah.
Okay.
All those months ago.
Yeah.
So I sent you my application, and then I think about a week later, I received a phone call. I spoke with, I think, one of the hiring managers, who then redirected my application, and I then applied where she told me to. And then I received a call from the systems engineering manager, and then we just spoke. He said that he would find a place for me, and then we just kind of talked about general things, and then I think the next day he called back with a team on the line as well, and that was the team that I worked with for the summer, and I started, I think, 2 weeks after that.
Was that nerve-wracking, Matt? It sounds pretty nerve-wracking. What did it feel like?
I would say, honestly, it was more exciting than nerve-wracking. Like the turnaround for everything, because I'd spent months like submitting applications and hearing nothing. So I was just excited to hear back so quickly, and everything was just so easy.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't make that point, but boy, going through these facilitated pathways that I can set up for you is, as Matt just said, makes all the difference in the world. So I really encourage students to catch up with me about this. I was going to raise some questions for Adith, Lizzie, but is there anything that you would want to ask Nathan or Matt about their experience?
Yeah, I have some questions for the end for everyone. So I'll kind of
nothing more about them. Sure. So Adith, while you were here on campus, you were very active in supporting the radical change in disability culture and neurodiversity culture that we're looking for on our campus. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then, how did that impact your career development?
Sure. Yeah, so like you just mentioned, when I was a student at Maryland, I got involved pretty heavily with the questions are surrounding access and inclusion for students with all types of disabilities. Personally, I have a mobility impairment that requires me to use a power wheelchair. So my disability is pretty visible. And, like Nancy said, there's so many students with invisible disabilities, anyone who falls into the category of being neurodiverse. So a lot of the work that I did on campus related to, and also because of my engineering background, related to taking a look at the infrastructure that was in place on campus. Things like sidewalks, roads, walkways, locations of stairs, locations of crosswalks, things of that nature. And throughout my time on campus, I started compiling a list of, places where infrastructure could be made more accessible, such as adding curb cuts to certain crosswalks, making sure there was good signage, making sure that building entrances and getting to classrooms, the route was accessible, things like that. And in 2019, I put all my findings together and published a report called the Campus Accessibility Report. And that is sort of what catapulted me into the area of working with more of the organizations on campus dealing with accessibility, inclusion, the main one being the President's Commission on Disability Issues. I was a student member of the commission, and now I'm an alumni member, so I'm still involved. And I also helped start the Student Advisory Committee for the PCDI, which is still going on to this day. And we have students who are interested in that sort of thing. And sort of my career path was a little bit out of the ordinary. It wasn't really, I didn't really follow one of those projected pathways that one of the many that Nancy has to offer. Sometimes I wish I did. It would have made things certainly easier, but eventually I found my own way. And I think graduating during COVID didn't help matters much in terms of like what Matt spoke about sending out so many applications and working on things for months and not hearing back. I think, taking one of those projected pathways that the Career Center offers certainly helps with that. But so anyway, the internships I had during my time as a student, one of them was working with a small robotics company on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, down near the NASA Wallops Island facility. Another one of my internships was with the city of Salisbury, who is my current employer. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And the third internship I had was with the Division of IT at Maryland. So essentially all over the place, my experience. And I did some research on campus as well, looking into making buildings more energy efficient, and designed to help reduce energy use, especially in terms of heating and cooling, which is all sort of in the realm of mechanical engineering. So I had a lot of varied experiences when I was on campus and off campus. And I think the resources that Nancy provided through all the programs that the Career Center offers for neurodiverse students and students with disabilities were honestly a great asset. And I don't think I would be where I am today without that sort of support, without the knowledge that and the coaching that I received. A lot of things like interviewing skills, when to disclose my disability and how to request accommodations, and more than that, if those accommodations were met with some sort of resistance by the employer, how to sort of navigate that situation. Because the sad reality is that sometimes employers will question whether you need accommodations, but Nancy is there to help you navigate those sort of situations. Anyway, my work with infrastructure on campus and helping to make things more accessible had a big role in my job today. So during my job interview for my current job, I talked a lot about that project. And what I do right now is, so my department handles all the permits and engineering reviews for any sort of development that's going on within the city of Salisbury. So anytime someone wants to build a new housing complex or a new strip mall or put up a new building or build a new park, anything, any sort of development, it goes through our department. And a lot of what I do there is I make sure that all of the plans are up to engineering code. And I also am the one at my office who handles whether things are up to ADA standards. And so even with my job, I'm able to ensure that the spaces that are created by engineers, by contractors, by architects are accessible and inclusive for all people. And the experience that I needed to be able to land this job started with sort of the work that I did at Maryland and the work that I continue to do. Yeah, and I started out working part-time with the city of Salisbury once I got my job, and now I've transitioned to full-time. And I think that speaks to the point that Nancy was making about it's not necessarily about getting the job, it's about keeping the job. And sometimes if you start out, I know one of the things that I was concerned with when working was mental and physical fatigue. Because of my condition, I tend to fatigue more easily. So my concern was, oh, what if I can't do full-time? What if I'm not able to do that? And lots of employers are looking for full-time employees. But because of the connection that I had with the city of Salisbury, I was able to show to them that I would be an asset, even working part-time or even with accommodations or even not being able to take on as much of a workload as anyone else. And I'm treated just the same as any other employee. There's, aside from modified desk height at my desk, a phone that automatically answers on speakerphone so that I don't have to pick up the receiver, and one or two other accommodations, I'm able to do just the same amount of work as any other employee, and I'm treated just the same, no different. And yeah, so that's kind of an overview of my entire experience up to this point.
Great, Adi, thanks so much.
Sure.
I have a lot of questions, but Lizzie, why don't I turn to you? Are there questions that you want to prompt us with?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for sharing your stories. I'm really blown away, just like how in depth and the scope of things that you've done in deep, especially. And I feel like all of you really embody like the strengths aspect of this. And I want to just maybe ask a deeper question about that. Was there anything specifically, that you did to like gain confidence? Is there anything that you, Nancy mentioned in her presentation earlier, kind of going from parents and teachers, encouraging you to ask for help versus that college transition? Is there anything you felt was difficult about that, or was it very natural for you to ask, for additional advice or help at certain times? I'd love to hear maybe a little bit more about either of those things. I think that'd be very valuable.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So when I was in high school, I started taking a more active role in my own accommodations in school. And I think that really helped me feel comfortable once I got to college. And it was more my responsibility rather than my parents or teachers or faculty sort of leading that. So I think high school is a great time to practice, especially if you required any accommodations in high school. It's a great time to practice sort of being an advocate for yourself. Because if anything is missed, your parents will be there to sort of fill in the gaps. Teachers might also be there to sort of fill in the gaps. Things that you may not have in college. And, you know, I know many students, when they come to campus is the first time they even feel they need accommodations. And that's sort of an experience I don't have, so I can't really speak to that as much. But if you have the opportunity to practice self-advocacy for accommodations, do it. It'll make you feel a lot more comfortable in the long run.
Hey, Nathan and Matt, do you have anything to say about that? I mean, we do know research shows that the lack of self-advocacy skills is one of the greatest impediments to success in the workplace. So you do need good self-advocacy skills. Do either of you have any memories of, you know, how you developed those or situations where you realized you were using self-advocacy in a new way, maybe?
Yeah, so like when I was in high school, I would try to handle as much as possible for myself. Like Deeth was saying, like I was trying to self-advocate as much as possible. But of course, like my parents were there to help me fill in the gaps. And if what I was doing for myself wasn't working, then they could step in and kind of help me with that. And that kind of set the stage for my college experience. And it kind of showed me how to advocate for myself in a more effective way.
Thank you so much. And I was curious, it sounds like you have all worked in really supportive environments, especially at Northrop, it sounds like, but have you guys ever experienced spaces where maybe colleagues or supervisors were not super supportive of accommodations? And then how did you handle that? Are there any tips you can give to students navigating that if they're currently working somewhere or, you know, might be fearful that that will happen?
Yeah, I can certainly speak to that as well. That is actually a recent experience that I've had myself. So my employer prior to the city of Salisbury was Epic Systems out in Wisconsin. And the company overall is fantastic. It's a great place to work. It's a really good environment right out of college because it feels a lot like college. However, my team specifically, my supervisor, he was not particularly in touch with his employees and the people who worked underneath him, and that included me. And I believe he has since left the company. But I heard from other team members of mine as well that he sometimes was a little hard-headed and resistant to requests, or if they asked for assistance with something, he wouldn't be super forthcoming and things like that. And so I asked for a couple of accommodations when I was there. And of course, one of them was raising the height of my desk, which was fine. Being able to answer my phone on speakerphone, which was fine. The place I found some resistance was, as employees, we're all issued laptops. And the standard laptops for someone in the position I worked in were sort of the bulky, heavy things. And it was a struggle for me to lift them, to carry my laptop around like I needed to. So I requested for a lighter device. A lot of the software developers are the ones who had those lighter devices, the more sleek laptops, simply because their work required a lot more actual use of that device. My position required day-to-day use of the laptop as well, but so essentially I put in that request to my supervisor. All requests have to go through your supervisor. That's the way the company has it set up. So I put that in, and I faced surprisingly a lot of resistance to simply getting a lighter device. Reasoning such as, oh, we don't have devices in stock, or we would have to take the device from someone else and give it to you, or these are the standard devices used by your role. If you're unable to do this, you may need to use your personal devices. There are regulations in the ADA that require employers to provide the equipment necessary and any reasonable accommodations. So one thing that I did to sort of navigate this situation was bring that up in a nice way, in a polite way, simply refer them to the ADA standards where your sort of rights are outlined, and sort of say, I understand, the circumstances. However, this is one of the rights given to me by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and here it is in writing. And he may not have been too happy about it, but sometimes pointing out things like that, respectfully, of course, nicely, of course, can really go, it can sort of add that extra push you need to sort of get your accommodations approved. So that's sort
So
of
I'll chime in there, Edith, because what you have the right to under the law is to request accommodations.
Mhm.
You don't have the right to any accommodation. There's no
Right.
right in the law to any particular accommodation. You
Correct.
have the right to request an accommodation. And we tell students the process of getting accommodations is a negotiation.
Mhm.
You're not making demands and they're not refusing demands. It's a negotiation. In your case, you resolved that negotiation pretty quickly by referring to the law, but not because the law guaranteed you the right, perhaps because they didn't understand the law and they thought maybe they did have to give you the what you requested.
Mhm.
But no, it's always, that's what reasonable accommodation means. Reasonable is, has no, well, it has a little bit of a standard, but it's still a pretty nebulous term. And, you always have to remember the process of requesting accommodations is going to be a back and forth. It's going to be a conversation. It's going to be a negotiation. You might not get exactly what you wanted. You might get something between what you wanted and what the employer is proposing.
Mhm.
But under the law, that's fair. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and to that point, the way that my situation was resolved was I was allowed to use my personal laptop at work, and sort of so they didn't have to provide me with the sleeker, lighter devices, but I also didn't have to lug around this heavy computer with me. I was able to just use my own personal device for that.
Thank you so much for sharing, and also Nancy for clarifying that important distinction. I want to give an opportunity for Nathan and Matt to add anything to the original question, and then I'll go ahead and wrap up so that our students on the call can ask any questions offline, and I'll wrap up the recording. So anything that you want to ask Nancy as a final question also?
No, I do. I wonder if Matt or Nathan, if not in the workplace, how about on campus? Do you have any ways to encourage fellow students to advocate for their, for what they're due as students with disabilities?
I guess I would say for me, because I didn't have accommodations in high school, when I got to college, I kind of struggled with meeting expectations and being able to juggle all the responsibilities, and that kind of led to me like burning out and having a lot of difficulties. So for me, it was definitely important to have better self-advocacy skills and seek counseling and help when I need it. And I think since then, I've been able to make a lot more. I've been able to make a lot more positive changes and have a successful internship and just be able to manage difficulties in life a lot better. So it was definitely an important process.
Incredible. So thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your stories and answering all these questions. Just a reminder to anyone watching, this is the very first career Q&A with Engineering Career Services. So every Friday, third Friday of the month at 1 o'clock, we'll have a new series for you to answer real questions around work. And I'm going to stop recording so that our students can ask questions, and happy to answer anything. Feel free to get in touch with us at career@umd.edu in the future as well. And we'll see you next time.